Does grounded still work if you're wearing socks? It will, as long as the socks are natural fibers, such as cotton. However, wool actually acts as a buffer for the electricity of the earth. That's why if you go into some yogas, like Kundalini yoga, they actually have wool. Do I have one in here? I do in the little thing back there. But they actually use wool. They sit on sheepskin, which I guess is more than wool. They sit on sheepskin to protect the energy of the earth so it doesn't come up and interact with the frequency. But on that, guys, so on that note, there's something called the lower self and the higher self. Okay, so everyone's trying to connect. I shouldn't speak so labelly. A lot of us are really trying to, I sit on sheepskin for Kundalini for being neutral. Yeah, so I'm just going out on a limb and saying that wool might interact with the grounding of the earth if you're wearing wool socks. But there's not the skin there, so I don't know. Wool also is a very high vibing fabric. So is linen, but you shouldn't wear wool and linen at the same time because it'll interact with each other and actually become very unharmonious. The charge on both of them will become very unharmonious. I'm about to go outside, so I'm just putting some tape over my wounds so they don't get sunburned, and I'm using the camera as a mirror. But what was I saying? What was I talking about before the socks? Oh, higher self and lower self. So there's a lower self and a higher self, and usually we have to be connected to the lower self before we can connect to the higher self. So we have to know what the difference is. The lower self is actually the earth, and I'll get to why in a second. And the higher self would be everything else. The other dimensions, the universe, the stars, the light, that would be higher self. So if we skip over the lower self to try to connect to the higher self, we won't be so whole. And the whole portion of the lower self that we need to make sure that we're in touch with, being the earth, is that the earth is actually who we are. We're a function of the earth. We are the earth experiencing itself. So we want to make sure that we're connected to our full self. And our full self is the earth. We are a cell of the earth. So we would have more capability to interact with our higher selves if we are connected to our lower self, being the earth. If we were one with our full body, then that full body, that full being will have better interaction with the dimensions higher than us, because these other dimensions have indicators that allow them to make a decision to connect with us. And one of those indicators is if we are connected to the planet, if we are in realization that we are the planet. All right, so if we are not in realization that we are the planet, then there might be some zones that our access is denied to. Okay, so I'm going to put this right here. This is going to allow me to go outside and not get sunburned. And I just put oil all over it, so I don't even think it's going to stick. So lower self being the earth, higher self being I'm going to get into something really cool right here in a second. So if you guys think about, why are there these stone structures all over the planet? What is the importance of the energy grids of the planet? Why did the ancients take so much care in harmonizing the energy of the planet? And that's why, because the planet is really what's important. It's not necessarily humans. We have to understand that the being that we're trying to save isn't necessarily the humans, it's the planet. Like, we are the planet, and the planet is what's important. So that's what these stone structures are all over the planet in certain ley lines of energy, because the planet itself does have chakra systems. The planet itself does have meridians. The planet itself does have an evolutionary process that it goes through. And as a part of the evolution of the planet, there is us. Okay? As we are evolving, the planet is evolving, because we are the planet. We are the being of Earth. We are the thinking aspect of Earth. And so there's also the function of underground civilizations, right? And also back to the stone structures. The reason why it's made out of stone is because that's the minerals. That is the Earth. So the minerals of this planet, according to, you're going to think this is weird, but according to the trees, is the minerals, the gold, the minerals of the planet are the nervous system. Did I get that right? The water is the blood. The minerals are the brain. Yeah, they are the nerves. So that's what the stone structures are all over the planet. It's keeping the energy flowing. Is anybody asking, do you feel animal products help keep us grounded? That's a very interesting question. Do I have a natural alternative to shampoo? Guys, questions at the bottom of the screen on Instagram, TikTok. There's 18 of you. I'm new at going live on TikTok, but I'm watching. All right, so first question was, do I feel that animal products help keep us grounded? How can I say this in a way? Okay, so carne, meat, right? And so I don't know Spanish that well. I took 3 years in high school, and I have a fiance that speaks Spanish, but going into other languages gives us more context of what words actually mean. So in Spanish, the word for meat, I guess, or steak or something is carne, right? And so if you think about eating an animal, eating the carne, carne also is the same root etymology as carnate, like reincarnate, like to be incarnated into this reality, right? So as you are eating animals, everything's a cycle of life, right? There's the air and the light and the earth, and then that gets incarnated into a being, whether it's a plant or an animal. And so animals, carne, carnage, are very dense. So when you're eating it, you are very connected to this carnation. All right, so you're very in this reality. This reality being this X, Y, and Z third dimensional reality traveling on the fourth dimension of time. So to answer the question, yes, I believe that eating animals does keep us more grounded into this reality. If we take the carne, the physical dense matter out of our diet, then I would assume, meaning that I don't know the exact answer to this, but assumptively we would become lighter. We would become lighter. We become less connected to this dense physical reality, and it seems maybe more able to access higher realms. With that said, I've been studying diet from a spiritual and a physical standpoint for over 15 years. I used to give lectures And I do not comment or educate on diet on my channels because I am thoroughly confused on what is the best. I'm not certain there is a best. I'm also not certain whether it is ethical or not ethical to eat animals because of my fundamental gnosis of death. I don't necessarily think death is wrong, even if it means imposing death on another, because death is ultimately a healthy part of life. So I'm admittedly confused on the diet, what is best. That's why I do not comment on it. I do not judge. I think it's a experience that we're here to all make our own decisions on. Where were you last before Earth? I can't tell either. I'm a little bit confused on that. Do I have a natural alternative to shampoo? So I didn't use shampoo or conditioner for 13 years. I just started using shampoo and conditioner like a year ago. I don't know what's best. I'm not a fan of anything more than another. And I don't have an answer for that. which is okay, because I'm not a hair expert. I just have long hair and thick hair. All right, so does Purium ship outside of North America or Europe? No, it doesn't. Tell us your thoughts on carnivore diet. Guys, like I said, I mean, this carnivore thing I did before carnivore was even labeled carnivore. I did that back when I was competing. Just organs and very little sugar, very little plants. Definitely, I guess I was eating a lot more plants than fruit. Is Ra your chosen name or given name? So, interesting question. You guys might be interested in this answer. I was born Ronald. Okay, Ronald. And then I went by Ronnie my whole life. And I was known as Ronnie Teasdale. And I was fighter and a competitive athlete and very stoic and strong and commanded authority. That was who I was. I owned gyms, and eventually I started growing out of that character, and I decided that as I grow out of this character and enter a new chapter, a new name change, it just felt right. So instead of Ronnie, I went back to Ronald. I felt like I was outgrowing Ronnie. And I went back to Ronald. And when I went back to Ronald, I spelled it on Instagram, Ra_Nold. Okay, so that's an important part of the story. I was Ra_Nold, like Ronald. And Ronald didn't really feel right. I think I lasted a few weeks introducing myself as Ronald. And so I was like, man, Ronald doesn't feel good. Ronnie seems like somebody I used to be. And so I was doing my Kundalini yoga teacher training, and there was this whole thing about getting a spiritual name, basically being assigned a spiritual name by a spiritual master who consults these other higher realms that I mentioned at the beginning of this live. And so I decided to do that. And the thing with the spiritual name is you're supposed to give up your birth name, because a name is the energy, it's the sound, it's the acoustic, it's the vibration that you're receiving in as you. And so once you receive this spiritual name, you're graduating to this vibrational signature of a name. And so I agreed to do that, and I got the name Ravi Chandar. Now, Ravi means essence of the sun, Chandar means moon, and so I started introducing myself as Ravi. And that lasted a few months, but Ravi ultimately also didn't really resonate. And as I said, I was already spelling my name Ronald on Instagram, and so I got Ronald, my birth name, Ronnie, the name I went by most of my life, Ravi, which was the spiritual name, and I was on Instagram as Ra_Nold. And then I was like, okay, Ra was a part of every single one of these names, right? It was the beginning of every single one of these names. And so I was like, I'm going to chop off the end of all of these names and just see how Ra feels introducing myself. And it was immediately resonating, and that's where the name Ra comes from. It was always a part of my name, but that's where it comes from. Turmeric paste with coconut oil for the scabbing and scarring on the nose. Thank you for that. Do I know of the nutritionist Agenus von der Plantz? Yes, but I have not looked into his stuff. I think that's mostly primal-ish, right? Carnivore-ish. Is humanity devolving or evolving in your perspective according to everything that's going on in the world and our individual lives? Most definitely evolving. Like, it's super apparent, guys. The next step in our ladder of ascension. So let me back up for a second. Let's say first level of consciousness is light, the minerals, earth, the water, the air, and then the consciousness that's going to make it all up, right? When the consciousness connects with that, then that's the first level of consciousness. The second level is when these things combine and become a aware being. So a plant or an animal, they're aware, right? They have the notion that they must consume life to survive. They must consume the first level of consciousness, right? Plants consume this first level of consciousness to survive. They consume the minerals, they consume the air, they consume the light, they consume the ether to make itself. So they're an aware being. That's the second level of consciousness. The third level of consciousness is a self-aware being. And this is what we are. So we've got aware beings, plants and animals, self-aware beings, human beings. You can start to see that sometimes through the graduation of many, many lifetimes as an aware being, the animals start to become self-aware, right? So we think about a higher functioning animal. We've got like a gorilla. A gorilla, an ape, is self-aware because it understands self. Hence why it would have a territory. Hence why it would protect a harem. Hence why it would protect its children, because there's self-awareness, all right? And that consciousness, let's say it's traveling through entities, that consciousness would be ready to be a lower level human, all right? So in order to understand, as the question states, are we evolving or devolving, we would need to know what the level underneath us is, self-aware beings, or the level above us. So the level above us, the fourth level of consciousness, is a level of consciousness that is not only self-aware, like the third level, but it is aware of all other selves. Okay, are you following me there? They're aware of all other selves. And what that means is that when one self feels something, the whole species feels something. All right, when one self learns something, then all other selves learn something. And in the fourth level, it's mostly about feelings. So you begin to feel all other selves. You begin to become empathic as an entire species along with the planet itself. All right, now, why do I say we're most definitely going in this direction? Because we are. Right now, I'm sitting potentially thousands of miles from each of you, and you guys are being able to digest my thoughts and my feelings and how I look. And you guys are intaking this information at a rate that is much better than it was 50 years ago. Okay, 50 years ago, we really only got these interactions and understood other beings when they're in our close environment. Now we can go on our phone, and in the matter of minutes, we can be attuned and aligned to 50 other people or thousands of other people over the course of a day through our devices. So technologically, we are supporting ourselves at the next stage of consciousness, where we are being able to tune into each other. Eventually, this will happen without our devices, maybe. That's where it's like, are we going into this next level of consciousness as cyborgs, or are we going into this next level of consciousness as natural entities? The whole point of a lot of the stone structures all over the planet was to bring the planet into harmony and to flow frequency, the natural frequency of the earth throughout the entire planet, so that the humans on the surface of the planet could connect with each other and flow feelings and thoughts from each other. Okay, so I'll just finish this ladder unless there's a more interesting question. Let me think. Is quantum physics flawed? I'm not going to choose to answer that one. Is it possible for a human to remember themselves as a rock or a mineral? So there's a book called Initiation that talks about the initiation process of Egypt. And it's basically about this woman who can remember her past lives. And one of them, she goes through the initiation process in Egypt because she was the daughter of a pharaoh that then became the wife of that same pharaoh. And which is a whole interesting thing, guys, when you think about mating of gods and half gods. They didn't necessarily mate physically like we do. We have forgotten how to mate non-physically, right? So if you guys, most of you are familiar with the story of Mary and Joseph and Jesus and the virgin birth, which happens in a lot of the sacred texts. This is a different level of mating that grants immortality to both the person that is producing the offspring and that offspring. You become immortal when you mate non-physically, when you mate spiritually. So, anyways, the woman, so when a daughter marries the dad, it's not necessarily so they can have sex. That's just what it means in our culture, but back then it's different because they had a different non-physical understanding of themselves. So she goes through the initiation process and she gets to the point where she faces an aspect of life that she's not familiar with, and that is lust. And she goes through the initiation process, becomes a priestess, and then gets seduced by a person, and because she loses control, she falls levels of consciousness. Okay, so as I was explaining the levels of consciousness, she was very, very high, ascended, and you guys might have heard, like, the higher you go, the further you fall. So it's the same thing with levels of consciousness. You should know certain things, which is the whole purpose of the initiation. And if you read the book, you'll understand that she was warned to not go through the initiation process because she hadn't fulfilled her life experiences enough to know certain things, and one of those was that she was a virgin. She never really faced her sexual identity, so that got taken advantage of, and she fell. And what she did was she fell way down, and she got entombed. She basically got killed, and she was entombed, and she sat there for thousands of years. Now, if you think about what that means in falling levels of consciousness, that could be falling to the level of a mineral or a rock. And when you also think about in religious texts, there's the concept of hell. And hell is a place that you go if you lived your life and you... how can I explain this? This is a little bit difficult to talk about because there's multiple meanings for everything. So I'm trying to stay on a thread that can be digested. Everything that I'm saying could be interpreted as that's wrong, and I'm aware of that. So when you fall levels of consciousness, let's say you go to hell, hell can be interpreted as that first level of consciousness, because imagine you fall to the level of a rock. What is a rock doing? It's literally just sitting in the sun or underneath the dirt for a long, long time with very, very little fluctuation in experience. And so that could be hell could be a metaphor or a way of trying to explain what it means to fall in consciousness like that priestess did. Hopefully that made some sort of sense. All right, so I said I was going to talk about the next levels of consciousness. So the fourth level of consciousness is being connected emotionally, all right? Some of us are being born now, some of us humans, some of us selves are being born now where we can empathically feel other people. I know many people, there's probably people listening to this right now that are empathic, that can feel each other. This is a level of, thank you, Abra, for buying a badge and donating to this. So, feeling is the next level of consciousness. The fifth level of consciousness, so we're at third, and these are all the chakras, right? The first level is the first, so we're at the third chakra, speaking from the seven chakra system. The fourth level is the feeling, when humans become feeling entities and we can feel each other all on the planet. Then the fifth level is thinking entities where we know each other. Now, these three levels are interesting because it explains what the purpose is, what the purpose of life is. So at the third level, at the second level of consciousness, become aware, right? We're aware that we exist and we need to eat and we need to mate and we need to find shelter, right? The third level, we become self-aware. We become aware of self. Lower level, third consciousness entities are very, very, very self-aware. They are very aware of their self. They're very hedonistic in nature. They're very about me, me, me. Me, me, me. Me, me, me. I will take. Me, me, me. As you start to go up, you become more about sharing and collaborating, right? And so why is this third level of consciousness necessary? It's necessary because we have to be aware of ourself so that when we start to collaborate, when we start to become one species, we can take the individual natures of the billions of people on this planet throughout all times, right? Because time begins to not exist the way that we experience it linearly, but the billions of beings, and we start to be able to incorporate their life experience, their expressions, and integrate them into the whole species. And so what is the purpose of this? Back to the planet, for those of you guys who've been listening from the start, it is to integrate all the experiences of self, all of the possible experiences available on this planet. It's to integrate it so that the planet can understand itself. And that's what we are. We are the planet comprehending the ability of itself, of life on this planet. That's what we are. We are a function of the planet so that the planet can know what it is to be a planet. We are the experiencing part of the planet. It's not just us. We have to remember that if we took all the human beings on Earth right now and put us in a pile, it would make, from estimates, right? I don't know this, but let's just say from what the information out there says, we could fill up a box that is 1 mile by 1 mile by 1 mile. A 1 mile cubed box would fit all of the humans on Earth. All right? If we did the same thing with ants, we would get that same volume. Okay, so there's actually way more ants, because if you think about how many ants fit in one human, There's that many times more ants. But by volume, there's the same amount of ants on this planet as there are humans. Okay, and they're also communicating. They also have a highly developed sense of community, all right, which probably started with the sense of self. So they all can communicate with each other. They know where the other ants are in the colony. There is argument to say that they might even be at that next level or 2 levels up. And they're a significant part of this planet. So that's just a little bit about who we are. So 4th level of consciousness, where you start to feel each other. 5th level, where you start to be aware of each other. After we can feel all of the humans on the planet and the planet itself and all those ants, probably in the 4th and 5th level, when we go into the 6th level of consciousness, there becomes less need for individual bodies, right? Because the bodies were designed so that we can have individual aspects of self. So 6th level of consciousness, the bodies become lighter, and eventually disembodiment happens. And so if you guys have read books like the Law of One books by Ra, which I suggest if you guys read it, I think they made the first one available on Audible. Make sure you definitely read the second book. It's the more valuable book of the 2. A lot of book series, definitely at least read the second book, because the first book's usually just teeing you up for the information that's actually relevant. Same thing with courses. Usually the second course, the advanced course, is the one that's way more relevant than the first one. The first one's just getting you up to speed. So in the 6th level of consciousness, bodies become not necessary, and also time becomes not necessary, because time is also just a function of change so that the earth can know itself. And the whole purpose of what we're doing is to, do I know this? Express, I'm missing one. Expression, something, integration, and transcendence. Creation, express, integrate, transcend. I'm missing one. How to be birth? No, it's not birth, not creation. Anyways, I don't need to go down that thread anymore. What do we got? Any questions on any of that? Put it in the question thing, which people aren't using, so let me just scroll up the comments. What is the difference between a soul and a spirit? That depends on the structure of the conversation. But basically, what I just explained with the planet is happening in an entire galaxy, and it's also happening in an entire universe. And the universe, the great thing about that, all those levels, is that you go from 6th to 7th, and then the 8th is the start of the next cycle. So it's just a constant rebirthing up the octaves, and that's what the universe is doing right now. The universe is in some sort of womb, and it's also going to be birthed into a new expression of self. All right, I think we can end it there, maybe? Isn't it an identity loss when we feel everything as ourself? I realize there's only one self, but I don't yet understand why the one self appears to have disagreements with self. That's a good question for one to ponder on, right? Like, why do things like murder and rape and war happen? That's definitely a dynamic thread of thought for us all to ponder on. With that, I'm going to end this. Thank you guys all for being here. Sayonara. TikTok off. Instagram.